What if I told you that at one point Carl Zeiss made a lens of epic proportions? They made a lens that was unfathomably fast, blindingly fast, the fastest lens of all time. Well, in today's video, we're going to talk about the Carl Zeiss Super Q Gigantar f.33, a lens with an f-stop so fast that it makes a Noctilux look like a pinhole camera. We're going to talk about the most insane lens that you've probably never heard of, and there's probably a pretty good reason for that. So let's get into it. Much like me, photography has always been obsessed with speed. Camera shake and movement of the subject have long since been the enemy of photographers. And initially, the way to fix these problems, or go a long way to fixing these problems, was when the film manufacturing companies developed different emulsions to make the exposure times quicker. You can look at my history of photography video if you want to know more about the development of film, but exposure times initially were really slow, but over the years, technology improved and exposure times got faster and faster and faster. But eventually, we kind of perfected the technology. We can't really make exposures any faster without some degradation of image quality. You can get 1600, 3200 film speed, but it's at the expense of grain size. You know, you're making these images that are just snowstorms. But over time, photographers eventually started clamoring for faster and faster lenses. And it's little wonder why. The benefits are clear. If you've got a fast lens, you can shoot that fixed film speed that you would have had at the time in more varied situations, right? If your lens went down to f1.2 or f1 or maybe even something lower than that, the likelihood that you could use your 200 speed film or 400 speed film even later in the evening goes up. It was a very clear way for film photographers to expand their shooting envelope. They could shoot their cameras in more flexible situations if they just had faster lenses. And it's the same thing with megapixels, right? More megapixels equals more better. The same thing for film speed. Lower f-stops means more better. And that's to say nothing of the aesthetic, artistic notions. We shoot these lenses, a 35mm f1.2 lens blurs the background a ton, an f2.8 lens doesn't. And you contrast that with the day that we live in now, for example. And this was obviously a concern when film speed was fixed, right? You threw a roll of 200 speed film in your camera, and sucker, you were committed to that roll of film for the most part, all the way through 36 shots, right? So you had to mean that you wanted to shoot 200 speed film because you were committed. Photographers these days have it so easy, right? If we want to increase our film speed, we just turn a little dial and the ISO value goes up from 200 to 400 to 800 to 1600, so on and so forth, all the way into the millions these days, right? Technology is just crazy. So it goes without saying that camera companies adapted, lens makers adapted. They began selling lenses with lower and lower f-stop values because it appealed to photographers. There was a clear, tangible benefit that they could market to photographers. Faster lenses are better. And it was with all of this background that the Carl Zeiss Super Q Gigantar was born. The lens was born in the 1960s during a time in which camera companies were aiming for larger and larger apertures. Just like I said, just like companies these days are wanting more and more megapixels. And while we talked about all these benefits to these lenses, you know, they give you the ability to shoot in lower light, they make the background slicker than KY jelly, there's lots of other drawbacks as well that are worth mentioning. These fast lenses are absolute units. Take a look at any of the new Sigma 1.2 lenses, for example. They're just huge. And the same goes for the Nikon 1.2 lenses and the Canon 1.2 lenses. They're just big things. As with anything, there's no free lunch when it comes to lens design. You're dealing with optics, you're dealing with physics, the bending of light. There's no way to get around some things. So the lenses, to let in more light, they just have to be bigger. And another drawback as well, even though the Leica Noctilux may get down to 0.95, oftentimes the image quality at wide open apertures is suspect. Oftentimes that's the softest aperture. And the company, Carl Zeiss, their primary focus has always been image quality, sharpness, contrast, those things. It was with that in mind that they decided to play a joke on the whole industry. It was their idea that they wanted to poke fun at the fast glass trend. It was Zeiss Icon's public relations guru, Herr Wolf Weyron. Zeiss had a bone to pick with everyone. They weren't out here chasing trends. Zeiss wanted to show that it doesn't matter how much a lens opens up. That's not what makes a better image. What makes a better image is how sharp, how contrasty, how high quality the optics inside the lens actually were. They would create a fake lens with a ridiculously fast aperture and a ridiculous lens size, obviously highlighting the continual pursuit of faster and faster glass at the expense of all these other negative trade-offs. Prior to Photokina in 1966, Weyron visited a buddy of his in the Zeiss lens design department. The two found an old condenser lens sitting around. They used it to create a Contax mount Franken lens using various found pieces. Along the way, they arbitrarily decided that their lens would have a focal length of 40 millimeters and a maximum aperture of 0.33, like we talked about. Blazing fast, right? The lens was even given a joking name. Zeiss called it the Super Q Gigantar. In German, Q stands for Quatsch, which basically means nonsense. And that's the story of how the fastest lens of all time sort of came to be. Even more fascinating though is the lens went up for auction in 2011 at the world famous Westlicht Photographica auction, where some of the biggest transactions in the camera world occur. The Super Q Gigantar had an opening price of $6,000. People expected it to go for around $16,000, but it ended up selling for $60,000. Too bad it didn't work. So poke around on the internet for a few minutes and you won't find any images taken with this lens because the lens doesn't function. It was a joke by Carl Zeiss played on the whole photography industry. If you thought this lighthearted video about Carl Zeiss was interesting, take a look at this video where I talk about something much darker. See, I made their logo red. As always, guys, thanks so much for watching.